An action VSC and red flag-packed inaugural Saudi Arabian Grand Prix with a victory for Lewis Hamilton, meaning he and Max Verstappen go into the last race of the season at Yas Queen Marina on equal points. And Daniel Ricciardo goes from P11 to P5. G'day there, my name is James Baldwin and welcome to another episode of Lakeside Drive's F1 podcast. In this episode, we review the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And I'm joined, as always, by my friends and yours. It's Tommy T. G'day, mate.
G'day, how you doing?
Good, isolating in your bedroom like the good boy that you are. And
yes.
Camp Meister, how are you, my friend?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm very good this morning, lads. But geez, what an absolute shambolic Grand Prix that was.
Yeah, that was no good.
Every way we look at it, geez, it's what we want to see as fans. It threw everything up, but I was getting angry. I think I swore a few times on the Discord, so I do apologise to you guys for that.
Well, a massive shout out to the Discord server and those people specifically on this side of the country that stayed up with us, or sorry, got up, I should say, to watch this, and those on the west that potentially almost went to bed but didn't, stayed up for the full race. Well done to you. And look, a massive thank you to you for listening to this podcast. Of course, we do a pre-drinks or a qualifying review episode as well. If you haven't listened to that yet, you can jump back across and listen to that right now. Tommy T putting on his tinfoil hat in respect to Campy, as always. But before we get into talking about the Grand Prix, lads, we have a couple of reviews that would have been left on Apple Podcasts. And a massive shout out to you as well if you've done this in the past. But we'll start with Turbo's Making Me Smile from Australia. They say, best F1 podcast easily the best show. They don't just talk about Max and Lewis, although we'll probably talk a lot about that at the moment. Yeah, we get the complete grid rundown. Great opinions, great knowledge, and always a good laugh to listen to. Haven't missed an episode, and following up with the MotoGP podcast is next level. In their downtime between races, they're punching out an old race review. Definitely keeps me entertained and drives home after the Arvo shift. Thank you so much for that. It's a very well considered and written review. Appreciate it. And also to Graham from the UK, who says, don't normally leave reviews, but feel like I had to for this one. You guys are great. The podcast helps me survive work shifts and regularly get workmates looking at me like I'm weird because I'm randomly bursting out laughing. Keep up the good work and thank you. Well, look, thank you, Graham. And seriously, this is fantastic. We've just hit overnight 80,000 downloads for the podcast, which is fantastic. Honestly, we are so stoked to be doing this. But let's launch into our normal race review, and we start with Tommy T's television broadcast review.
Well, we had enough red flags, so I managed to actually go back and watch some of the pre-race this time. Usually I'll wake up 5 minutes to go, literally watch a formation lap, and then we kick off. Why am I mucking around?
Yeah, fair enough too.
We had enough downtime, didn't we? So I went back and not much, to be honest. There was a bit of it looked like kind of the local kind of dads from the high school in an orchestra is what I kind of could assume, hanging out, playing the anthem together. No singing, just a bunch of kind of middle-aged dudes playing their instruments. And then we just had a light show going off. It looked like all they spent their money on was just lights and lasers and bloody screens and drones and stuff flying around. I mean, it is a night race, so in their defence, fair enough. But
hey, it looked spectacular.
Did it?
Oh,
didn't think it did.
Did it. Mate, redneck like me, I see a neon, I'm like, whoa, that's fancy.
Campy
So
and his
light
Grateful
shows,
Dead concerts.
I was stoked. I was like, oh.
Do you know, and also those drones with the countdown to the race, the last time that Campy really enjoyed watching that was when Biden was had accepted his presidency and it was flying over him.
Good one. That fell on deaf ears, that one, Jim. As if I would have watched Biden's inauguration.
You were there, were you? Why would you need to watch?
You were broadcasting live for Alan Jones. Let's talk about what actually happened though in the commentary. I've had a couple of people already message me, Tommy T, asking when we're going to be doing the commentary. The answer is never. I think at this point, unless something like Channel 31 get the rights to F1 here in Australia and they need to go full El Cheapo.
Student radio, yeah.
The three of us end up doing it. But one of the look, Jess was messaging me just before. And she said, and this was an interesting point as well, when the race engineer for Max said, I didn't think you needed to do that, Max, but that's okay. Both Crofty and Martin jumped on that. Yes, of course. You're talking about him, braking in the middle of the track when it wasn't the case at all. It was talking about giving that place to Hamilton. The British bias we speak about very often here. I actually thought the commentary was pretty good up until all of the nonsense that started going on. And then, I don't know, it sort of felt a little bit, I mean, they were obviously struggling for something to talk about. They're very clearly tired boys. But until that point, it was pretty good. We had a lot of throwing to random people, though, Tommy T. It felt like that maybe they had to have a red flag in the commentary box at one point because suddenly Damon Hill and Ant Davidson were commentating the race.
Shut it. We don't need any more Damon Hill. That guy's useless, to be honest. He's had his day.
Yes, I remember when I was lining up on the grid in the FW07 and it was very interesting watching them start. It's like, that has absolutely nothing with what we're talking about.
He's a candidate that needs to drive off into the summer and never come back, to be honest.
Very good.
Why this morning, TT?
Very good.
No, it was. I feel like I'm the Max stan in this podcast, and I felt a bit attacked. I was like, geez, Max can't win anything here, can he? Like, everything was kind of like with a grain of Max is the bad guy and Lewis is the hero. But, I mean, I'm kind of used to that kind of bias in what we're hearing with the broadcast that we get anyway. But then I was trying to consider it, and I was like, to be honest, like, he didn't really do much wrong. He was just being like regular Max. There was a lot of things that Mercedes was doing, Lewis in particular was doing, bunching up the pack, all those kind of things. And I think it was just an absolute mess, and they just kind of needed to kind of phrase it as a mess rather than trying to assign blame to each of the things. And that's kind of where they went wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really well put. I mean, Campy, overall, it was, the villain is Max Verstappen. Of course, we go into the next race at Yas Queen Marina, as I said, on equal points, which is exactly what we wanted, right? Like, this is last lap, the last kind of lunge. We'll see what happens. The championship will be decided then. But from a commentary point of view, they really just ignored the blaringly obvious stuff like Bottas, for example. The very clear, like, obviously just going completely against what is acceptable to back up. To do that double stack. And in recent history, we've seen teams be penalised for doing that. I think Red Bull last year or the year before got penalised for doing exactly that. So it seems to be very one-sided. I mean, one way or another, it's good because we're equal points. But from your point of view, Campy, overall, from a broadcast perspective, are we still leaning too heavily to the right?
I don't think you can go right and be on the wrong side of it, put it that way. I'm not. Look, I don't like the British bias. I hate that. I'll stand there. But I think that they're trying to get it right at the moment. And, I mean, there's bias and everything, right? So, look, I think they were pretty kind to Max. I mean, I think Brundle's comments around Max that he needs to tidy up his driving style is the correct comment. I question the way that he goes about it sometimes. It's not dirty and it's not running into people, but just, I mean, he never had that corner off the restart to Lewis and went wide and then cut him off. I was just like, Max, it's dumb. Why would you do that? I mean, I understand his car's not as quick and he needs to do absolutely everything possible, but I think Max does need to tidy up some of the stuff because Lewis isn't doing those things at the moment. Lewis is doing cheeky things like under a virtual safety car or the Bottas incident that you're referring to, James, where he's backing up the pack a bit. They're the things that you can get away with. Like they're the things in the rules that are open to interpretation when they're not at racing speeds. But when these guys are racing at speed and going in into corners and first corners. That's when Max is doing the wrong thing, and Mercedes seem to be on the right side of it at the moment. So I think you can attribute the blame with that framework in mind. Mercedes are being cheeky when they can be cheeky. Under the interpretation, it's a bit like in a rugby scrum in the breakdown. It's open to interpretation. Depending on what referee you get, he'll adjudicate it one way or another. So I think that's where Mercedes are winning at the moment.
I just don't know if Max has gamesmanship. I think he's just raw. I don't think he thinks about these things and tries to be crafty and stuff. Whereas Lewis is
you got to love him for it too.
And Max is just raw, isn't he? He's like, this is how it is. He's like. You could see his driving was pissed off, and that's what he drove like. Like it was no surprise that he was going to run straight through that corner and do a full Alonso and just go off the track to get in front.
Well, before we continue talking about this, let's give a quick score to the broadcast review and we'll move on. Tommy T, what's your out of 10 review score?
The race was good, but the broadcast was average. So does that balance out to like a 6?
I'm putting on a protest. That light show was exceptional.
You are off your head. This is not the Grateful Dead, mate. You can't just smoke a doob and just say it's all good. This is F1. We do not want that here.
All right, 6 out of 10. Jess said 0 out of 10, so maybe we'll just take a median of that.
The race was good enough to bring it back, I think.
Oh, fair enough. Let's talk about Formula 2 before we get into the Max v. Lewis debacle.
How do we even know? We didn't wake up that early, did we, James?
Yeah, no. Normal people didn't wake up that early, but Campy, who doesn't ever sleep, it seems, he just enters hibernation once a year, and that's when Formula 1's not on, and if the rest of the year he wakes up all the time to be able to watch it. Campy, now look, we had a bit of a conversation around the safety of the circuit. And there was, and when we spoke to Josh Revel as well, we had a bit of a chat about, the potential danger that Formula 2 could have around this track. It wasn't actually a track-specific incident that happened, though, but take us through what happened.
Oh, look, we just had a few crashes and red flags came out straight away. I think 2 laps in, I believe. And then to fix the damage, they took a long time to fix it. Race finally restarted, and we had another incident, another red flag straight away. So we didn't get any racing for that feature race, really, other than the first lap and a bit. Well, it wasn't even a lap. It was more half of a lap before the red flag came out. So, look, it was a bit of a reflection of the 2 starts that we had in the F1 race. 2 red flags, half points awarded. Oscar Piastri got 13.5, so he just extended his lead. He was on pole, so, I mean, that kid, as an Australian, looking forward, I'll tell you what, talk about a nice man, cool, calm and collected. Mm-hmm. He doesn't seem to have, we spoke about this with Josh Revel too, he doesn't seem to have that outright blistering pace that's 3/10, 4/10 quicker than everyone else, but this kid is so consistent. He's like an Alain Prost where he just nurses the car, but he always gets results. He's never the difference between his worst and his best is very small, and he's putting his car in all the right positions. I mean, coming in hasn't been racing or driving for however long. It's been about 3 months since the last F2 race, leading the championship. All that pressure for these young guys can build up over time, but for him to come and put it out on pole straight away and take a win in the first feature race, the second sprint race, and get the result in the feature race, albeit we didn't do much racing. Just speaks to the guy's composure and the way that he treats the car. And I with 1 race to go, I think he's 60 odd points in front now, 54 or something. So he'll walk away with that championship. That's firmly in his bag. I think Schwartzman's the only one that can win it if he wins all 3 races, which is damn near impossible. So look, all credit to Oscar. We're stoked. So we'll wait 1 more week to celebrate for him. But this track's interesting. I think we're going the FIA and F1 are going to firmly look at the way this track raced this weekend and make some decisions on it moving forward. So,
and we have to also mention the accident with Pourchaire and Fittipaldi too. Pourchaire stalled, it seemed, off the line. Had an issue getting away, and Fittipaldi just collected him. It was a massive, massive bang. There's a video of someone who was in the stands who filmed it on Twitter. well worth going and checking it out just to see how fast that it was. It was an incredible high G collision, but luckily, by all accounts, they're both okay. As I said, it's not a track-specific accident, that one. That was just a starting incident. But look, good for Oscar, as you say. Happy to see that. Be good for him to walk away with that F2 championship like he did with F3. All right, well, let's get into talking about this Grand Prix from a Formula One point of view before we go through team by team.
Can we skip Haas? Can we skip?
Before we go through team by team, let's talk about some overall talking points. I want your opinions of the track from a racing point of view. We've had your qualifying point of view yesterday. Tommy T, let's start with you. What did you think overall as a racing circuit?
I like it for the racing. I think it's just they got to do something about when someone goes off track because it's inevitable, which is more runoffs, which is possible, I still think, because of the way it's built. I feel like runoffs are possible to be built into this. Like, we've got way more runoffs at places like Baku and things, so I don't know why that's not possible. But I think that's the problem. It's the retrieval of cars. It's those kind of things. And the virtual safety car is just useless. Get a real safety car out there, to be honest. Like, this kind of 40% thing, and you've got to keep to a delta and stuff. We saw like Max creeping, or Max being caught up by Lewis, all those kind of things. It's just really hard to manage, and no one really understands what's going on and what is 40% of like what your pace would be. It's really confusing. So get a car out there. I know it slows it down and you've got to bring the car back in, but at least we know that consistency, and then you get a restart, not just this ready, set, go. And all of a sudden, depending on where you are on the track, you're just live again. And I think that's just really unfair in comparison to the race leader getting to decide. And that comes back into that skill, and we get really interesting things off safety car restarts. So that's my thoughts initially.
And Campy, I mean, the VSCs that we had was to clear debris, and it just took forever for debris to be cleared away. Surely if you parked behind a real safety car, if Bert is there slowing people down and going, follow me on this line, then the marshals are able to safely operate on track, even if cars are passing them. That seemed to be the big issue, is just like big praise to whichever marshal it was who I think got a big part of Seb's car and just like was part of the 100-meter hurdles for Saudi Arabia. Must have been the team, because he just like managed to yeet himself into the escape hatch and did a very good job. But surely that's a better idea, is just getting that real safety car out and do it in 1 or 2 laps rather than waiting 4 or 5 laps.
Oh, look, the problem is you're bringing the virtual safety cars out so that they, to clean the track of debris. A decade ago, if a car broke down, we just used to leave it right where it parked, and to stop a race like that 4 times in 10 laps after we've just had a safety car. For me to watch it was just frustrating. Anyway, the track for me is very raceable. I don't think the drivers had the right mentality for the track. If this track needs to work, they need to make it, and they need to go in with a mentality like it's a Monaco. Otherwise, it's just going to be too dangerous, and we're going to continue to have the same issues that we have. That when there is an incident, the percentage of more incidents happening because of the design of the track, because of somebody crashing, just goes up exponentially. So I think they need to look at it, but I think the drivers need to I think they need to change their mindset to the way they approach this track. I mean, that Kimi Raikkonen v Vettel incident was just like it just didn't need to happen. The positions of the car was... I could see why Kimi was doing what he was doing, but if he had a mentality like it was Monaco and, Seb had given him some room, because I think Seb should have given him a bit more room too. I just think that, just a bit of a change in mentality and, bigger picture in mind. But, hey, try telling that to 20 guys who are the most competitive people in the on the face of the planet. And
I think it's hard because the speed of this track as well, though, right? Because this is the second fastest track. Monaco is very slow in comparison as well. So you're already in a different mindset, I think, as well. But you're right. Like, they do need to consider the peril of, like, trying those moves here in comparison, because you wouldn't do it at Monaco. You wouldn't throw things up the inside as carelessly as you were here.
Yeah.
I think for next year, the racing will be much better. It's, as I said in the Pre-Drinks podcast, it's like the Azerbaijan first time around, didn't really know what the track was like. Next year, at least they've got some data, although all new cars. And yes, it's fun. It's funny to think that we're going into the final weekend of this era of turbo hybrid F1 car. You know, we look back in all of these different eras of cars and go, oh, that was great, or this was great. Maybe in 10 years' time, we'll be looking back at this and going, geez, I mean, what an era that was. Anyway, that's just a thought bubble
Definitely
that we're on that.
Not.
Mercedes will be.
I was going to say, Merc will be. You know, they'll be parading around like the Red Bulls are paraded around from the Vettel winning era. Look, I know you don't want to talk about Haas, but let's go through team by team because it's worth mentioning Haas first because the first reason is Mick Schumacher going off. Looked like a pretty big shunt. Didn't really look like much had happened to the car, except the rear just went and into the barriers he went. Luckily, he took his hand off the steering wheel because it was a big shunt. Good though, of course, got out, was back in the pit lane whilst the red flag was operating. But that kind of caused the waterfall effect of what ended up happening for this tale of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Let's talk about the first red flag period because safety car was deployed first, of course, and everyone pretty much went into the pits except for DR and Max,
correct decision.
Which was the correct decision, staying out, of course. And for DR, it was good because obviously he was on that hard set of tyres starting in that free tyre choice in 11th position. He had a cracking start as well. He did listen. He listened to us. It's nice. It's a good change. But for that red flag period, though, and it was brought up again, so I'll ask you the question now. Thoughts on being able to change tyres in a red flag period? Do we really care that much one way or another? Yes or no, Campy?
I thought we had this discussion 3 years ago and they changed the rules that you can't do it because there was some things that happened on track where people gain advantage. I get that it's motorsport. The problem I got is we had 5 laps of the yellow before they called the red, which to me, the mentality in the F2 race was if there was an incident, automatic red flag, especially in that turn. We saw many hits into that turn, that particular spot, and that crypto side note, that crypto whatever it was, advertising got the best bang for the buck than any other spot on the racetrack this week. Yeah.
Quite literally.
Yeah, you see what I did there?
Unfortunately, yeah.
But the mentality was call a red straight away. So if you call a red straight away, it negates it. The thing I don't like is that they were just slow to make the decision. 5 laps and then the red. I think I'm not unhappy that Max, got lucky in that situation. That is motorsport and these things happen. I think it's the things that are. I mean, the decision frustrated me that it took so long to make it. They're like a skeleton, those things. They're like a snake when you hit them. That's the way they're designed to work, that they fold in on each other and you can't keep it going. So, a little puncture in that and a bit of water coming out of it. Give me a break. It's not that bad. So, I think the decision was a bit over the top, but hey, it's motorsport and these things happen. It's the my issue was with the preceding issues that happened in the race. So,
okay, well, let's talk about them then, Tommy T, because we the red flag comes out. Of course, we have another standing start. I'm not unhappy about that. As many starts as possible is a good thing, so long as it's only one. Yeah, normally,
right.
1, 3.
Yeah.
But I think it's better than a safety car rolling start. It's unnecessary when the weather is absolutely fine. There's nothing on track.
So quickly on that, this just sums up the FIA and the insanity that is the FIA and all the management and rules and regulations. Is that you must maintain 10 car lengths on a formation lap, but when we're coming out of a red flag, it is not a formation lap. It is a safety car grid restart, and that rule doesn't apply. Why would that not be just a blanket rule for anything entering a grid start is the same regulations? Why is that something that is even brought into a possibility? And this is the inconsistencies that frustrate us. Why is the white line not the edge of the track every single time? Why is it not the same every time? Because Max is going, why is he more than 10 car places? And apparently he's allowed to do that now because it's not technically this. This is the insanity that drives us mental, because even the drivers don't understand, and they're literally paid millions of dollars to know what's going on and exploit every rule, and they still don't know what's going on. How the hell are we supposed to know? And that just doesn't seem fair and sporting to us, is that Max is now sitting there with cooked tyres and brakes and waiting, and then you wonder why his start isn't good. So these are the things that we just constantly go, well, it's not fair for everyone because you're just picking and choosing and deciding rules on the fly, it seems, but just because the regulations are just such a mess.
In saying that, though, Max gets to dictate the pace and how he wants to do it, however, and that can compromise people behind. So,
for sure.
And there's got to be a reason for that rule why it doesn't come under the same rules as the formation lap, and they're not going to clarify that to us why. But I mean, let's not get shitty about 10 car places, because I mean, if you were to be really police that, I mean, every driver on every racetrack at every week Grand Prix weekend, that would happen, because you get guys braking so that they get that gap and then they can accelerate to do their little half burnout and taking off on the back straight somewhere. So, I mean, it happens every time if you police that 10 place. I think it's just in there as a bit of a guide at times where they'd never really police it anyway. So,
well, I think the interesting point, Tommy T, though, is that the fact that we've now got access as a fan to the FIA radio, it just highlights it even more. I think that's probably the bigger issue. The stewards didn't seem to be all that involved this weekend. Michael Massey really taking the lead, which I'm not totally unhappy with, to be honest. Like, if you've got to do it, do it. The interaction, I mean, it was a little unclear around the second safety car, red flag restart, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But again, it's interesting having that kind of communication, because you're right, Tommy T, that sort of, it's 10 place. He wasn't keeping 10 places, and it doesn't matter. It's kind of, what it's happened. Okay, I'll move on with my life then. Anyway, but so for Schumacher, that obviously caused that. Then let's talk about the second start, because it was, I mean, interesting, and I feel for Perez here a little bit, but of course the big incident that happened out of the second corner was Leclerc was on the very outside, and Perez, I think, and even Charles said it, like, I think maybe Sergio forgot I was here, but it's such a narrow part of the track. There's so many cars. As Campy said, they're not thinking like this of Monaco. It's, the 3 cars wide into the first corner, which, happened in Singapore in 2018, Campy, the Kimi, Seb, Max,
and the wet,
squeeze, that sort of kind of mentality. It doesn't always work. But that obviously caused a big issue, because then, George Russell has gone, there's a car facing across the track. I'll just slow down. And Nikita Mazepin, with absolutely no time to react, and this is definitely not his fault at all, I don't think, smashes straight into the back of him, and it just became an absolute car park again, Tommy T. It's hard to get excited about a race when this kind of happens, and we saw it with F2 as well.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't think anyone's really to blame for that one. I think the track just narrows, and it was unfortunate. If anything, Perez probably should have remembered that Leclerc was still there along the inside. Leclerc had literally nowhere to go. He was against the wall. He was touching the wall, basically. So he got squeezed, Perez spun, and then George did the right thing, lifted off. But we don't have brake lights. So what was Mazepin to do? He can't know. And all of a sudden, he rounds his corner and there's a stationary car. Yeah. You're closing that speed way too quickly. There's nothing he could have done. Just glad that everyone walked away and there wasn't any lasting damage. Again, Halo has another win, because that George Russell's car was parked on top of Mazepin. So, just glad that it wasn't worse.
Yep, absolutely right.
All right. So what about Lewis v Max start?
Lewis
Max God mode.
Max's reaction was great, but his second phase was useless.
I don't think I've seen Lewis have a better start this year than that second start. He was almost in sixth gear by 10 meters from his starting box. He was that quick.
Yeah,
it was good to watch.
Well, Max tried to go the outside, right? So Max went around the outside and cut the track, and then re-entered the track and cut Lewis off, which meant Lewis lost position to Ocon. And he was also lost position to Ocon before he passed him up the straight again. I mean, that for me is like, that's cheeky from Max. He never had that corner.
No.
And anyway, so the decision was made by Michael Massey for the next restart. You can go back to third, Hamilton can take second, and Ocon has the lead. I think Mercedes stuffed it. They should have sent it to the stewards and they should have said, you apply a time penalty for this race, because then we wouldn't have seen the incidents that followed later on in the race with Lewis and Max, because Lewis could have just hung in right behind him and probably passed him at the end because of the tyre strategy, but we'll talk about that later. I think Mercedes were too quick to accept that we'll get in front of Max for the next start, because it ultimately didn't work out for them. I just think that's the driving that I don't like from Max, and that's what he's got to tidy up. It was almost not a carbon copy, but it was the same sort of driving in Brazil where he completely missed the apex, went wide, and pushed Lewis off track. And, do I think there should be a penalty for it? I said at the time, no. But if you continue to do that, and, 2 or 3 times it happened in this race, I mean, that's where the frustration with Max's driving comes in. So,
but to be fair to Max, I mean, the stewards have set that standard,
exactly.
If they're not going to penalise.
I know.
And Charles Leclerc even said, well, I'm going to change my driving style now if that means, I can get away with that kind of stuff. So fair play to Max, as you said earlier on, Campy, he doesn't have the pace in the car that Lewis has in that Mercedes. So he's got to pull all the tricks out of the bag. And this is the first time we have seen full Sebastian Vettel tricks, Ferrari 2018 versus Lewis Hamilton kind of driving, including backing him up, and brake checking or whatever it was. He was parked in the middle of the track. There is no denying the fact there was no letting Lewis past. It was, dear, oh well, whatever. Not unhappy about the mind games, can I just say? I think it's good. Max is finally showing some emotion this race. It's the first time that we've seen it, I think, all year. His dad's showing more emotion in the garage than he has been all year. But anyway, so that was an interesting restart, absolutely. It's a shame for that to have happened to Perez as well. We saw Sergio standing by, as Martin said, can't get an Uber, waiting for a long time because he thought, much like in previous times with the red flag in Spa, he could get the car fixed again. But unfortunately, he had no drive, so it's probably unlikely to happen. But just that shot of him standing waiting beside the track.
Sad boy.
Very sad boy.
And then you get into the third start. Talk me through the third start, Jim. What did you think?
Well, I was going to talk about Latifi first, but yes, okay. Well,
we'll
talk about.
We don't need to talk about Haas, Williams, or Aston Martin this weekend. Look,
funnily enough, though, Campy, there's a storyline. There's a storyline to go through, and this is part of the storyline. Latifi in 12th. Okay, nothing happened.
Throw the notes out.
But all I was going to say was Latifi, and then I was going to say, but then we have the third start of the race because we go to Aston Martin. And
I'll let you host then.
Ocon goes into first, absolutely. And look, well deserved at that point. He had a good enough start in that second restart to position himself. Clearly, though, can start from not first on the grid, cannot start from first on the grid. He was pointing the wrong direction. He was pointing to the right, not to the left. Didn't try to cover off Lewis, and Lewis was like, oh, okay. So whether or not it was just Ocon's like, dude, I am not going to bother racing you because, this is, I'm going to get third. There's no point. And look, fair enough. Maybe that was a strategy call from Alpine, from one of the 5 team principals that they've had. Maybe they were all just trying to come to a consensus as to where he should point.
I think 3 out of 2 decided that.
Yeah, exactly right. And there was just 4 people who weren't available for comment. But terrible start from him. But Lewis just absolutely was like, okay, cool. Well, I'll come across like I normally do to try and cover off Ocon, which then opened the door for one Maximus Verstappen who was like, hello, and he yeeted himself up the inside. And again, it is just one of those things. Yes, he's got to tidy up his driving style, but when he pulls off moves like that, you go, yes, please. How did you see that, Campy?
He was under pressure from Ricciardo, from behind.
Yeah.
And Lewis should have protected that inside way better than what he did. I could see what he was trying to do. He was trying to push Ocon a bit wide so that he didn't hit the apex of that second corner. But he forgot about the inside, and Max went up the dove real deep and got in front of both of them. So, look. But I tell you what, lucky for Lewis too, because he made contact. He got squeezed, 2 doesn't go into 3, and that could have been raced over for him really quickly. So
That's true. 2 doesn't go into 3. But
Boys,
not the first time.
I've been planning this. I've been planning these ones all week. How do I get out?
This is too much this episode.
Amazing.
This is the first time that Lewis had contact with the wing, and you're right, absolutely so lucky. Although maybe if it happened earlier, as we saw with the end of the race, he doesn't need that right end plate on his front wing. He was fine without it.
Yeah.
But lucky for both Ocon and Lewis. But Ocon cooked it, was too far out. Lewis was pushing him too far wide. Yep. And as you said, went, the reverse of what happened with Mexico, basically. And instead of Max on the outside, Max was on the inside and managed to get that place. But great. We haven't mentioned Daniel here yet. Great bloody starts all 3 times from one Daniel Ricciardo.
Awesome starts.
He is really, I think, comfortable with this car now, which is, great timing. But for where we sit and where we're looking at these starts, it's great. I mean, his P11 start, the first start that he had, he was sitting right in the middle of the pack, and I just was like, oh no, this is it for him because he'll get squeezed somewhere. Was lucky enough to avoid that contact. But yes, the pressure he was putting on Max Campy was outstanding. Of course, he strapped on those medium tyres and had some pace. It's good to see that McLaren having some pace again. But let's keep going then, talking about Aston Martin, because you mentioned just before the Kimi versus Vettel little battle that was going on. Before that, though, Seb and Yuki Tsunoda. Now, Tsunoda was having a pretty good race. As we said, Tommy T, earlier, he's pretty good on the lights in the Middle East, it seems. And fair enough, the pace was back in the car. But how did you see that with Yuki? I mean, you ended up getting a penalty for it for causing a collision versus Seb. Did you think Seb could have left a little bit more room, or was
I think
Yuki
he could have.
completely wrong?
I think he could have left a little bit more room. I mean, Yuki was really pushing it, but that's what we want to see from young drivers having a go. And like Seb knows what was going on there. He was kind of just being stubborn and willing to kind of make contact, I think, if anything. Like, I think it was more like you could avoid contact and then still get the penalty as well. And I don't know. I think I want to see more of that from Yuki. I wouldn't be disappointed as his team principal. I'd be like, more of that, more aggression, keep doing that.
Yeah. It's a shame, though, for Seb Campy, because
Seb's been around long enough to know to give these young guys space when you were driving like that.
Yeah.
But Seb going from 17th up into, it was like 7th or 8th at that point. Like, it was a fantastic moment. I was like, thank goodness, Seb was able to get up there. It was good for Aston Martin to finally recover, and then spun out. It was no good. And then he just started dropping parts of the Aston Martin around Jeddah, which I can only assume is where the second canvas is now going to be, because there's just so much Aston Martin there.
Well, that would have been from his contact with Raikkonen, I think.
Both contacts. That was the problem, because his rear wing collected the barrier with the spin with Tsunoda. Anyway, he ended up not finishing the race, of course, and Stroll in 11th, just outside the points. A terrible weekend for Aston Martin. The qualifying was no good. Their race pace, it was okay with Seb, but outside the points. Alfa Romeo, though, Kimi Raikkonen, as we've said, it's a bit of hard racing there. Does he really care anymore? No. Is he just sending it for the sake of it? Yeah. Oh, am I here for it? 100%. I am here for it. That's just how it is. But he's got one more race to go, but his teammate in Antonio Giovinazzi, best finish all year in 9th into the points, which is good. But Kimi's still outperforming. Kimi just still outperforming him on points if you look at the driver's standing. And I think if you look purely on that fact, which I'm sure that was part of Fred's thinking in terms of replacing him, fair enough too. You're being beaten by, yes, a world champion, but he's on the out, isn't he? So, anyway, it was interesting to see that. But there was a bit of a battle, Tommy T, with Gio and Carlos Sainz very early with that Ferrari. And, Giovinazzi was defending very well, considering he was in a much slower car.
Well, and Sainz had the pace, didn't he? He came from well back. Giovinazzi was good. I think whatever that car's doing at the moment's finally working for him, but unfortunately way too late. But he had a couple of great moves, Giovinazzi passing early, and I was like, why would you wait until now to do all these great moves? I think he's been driving all right all season, as we've kind of mentioned, but a little bit too late, mate.
There's nothing to lose for him now. Maybe it can't be that kind of mentality of, if I put it in the wall, then it doesn't matter.
Nah.
Yeah.
I think it does. You're right.
Ferrari, though, they've just been doing this position all for the last couple of races. It was last week, it was Leclerc 7th, Sainz 8th. This time it's Leclerc 7th, Sainz 8th. Sorry, the inverse of that, I should say. And Ferrari just gathering that momentum, aren't they, for the end of the season. Would have helped if McLaren had got a win this weekend to try and claw it back. But it definitely, to me, looks like that they've tied up that third position. But for Charles Leclerc, I should say, Tommy T, starting in fourth, that was good. It was kind of that sort of the jeopardy driver, that word that you love so much when it comes to Formula One, which we do as well. But of course, when it came to the Perez incident, he ended up having damage in his front wing, and the pace couldn't just be recovered from there. But overall, Ferrari would be fairly happy with these consistent positions. Yeah,
I think so. Well, I might have seen it wrong, but it looked like at the end Sainz was in front and they switched back, or Leclerc pushed really hard and overtook his teammate. I don't know how it happened. We didn't get to see it on track, but there was a switch very late on the last 2 laps, which is interesting because I suppose Leclerc, if you look at the race as a whole, probably deserved to be ahead of his teammate from qualifying earlier and had just unlucky kind of incidents. But Sainz was actually quicker towards the end and was doing really well. He recovered so many positions, but yeah, you're right. Like, Ferrari is somewhat back, and I'm excited to see what they're like next year if they're back up the front.
Yeah, Campy, we saw some real racing between both of them down the main straight. There was a bit of elbows out, and the incident with Yuki Tsunoda and Seb Vettel is the same time that was happening, and it kind of took a lot of the spotlight away from it. But Tommy T's right, and they ended up switching them because Sainz was clearly faster at that point. Different tyre compound on, though, and Ferrari have just honoured what they've done all year. If, all right, we'll let him pass, and if he can't, attack, then we'll switch back. It's exactly what happened with Gasly in previous times, and Gasly, yet again, was the car in front of the 2 Ferraris. But this is good teamwork, Campy. To be honest, I think in terms of the driver pairing, they're probably the most equal in terms of pace, I think, at the moment. I know Charles is fantastic. I think Carlos has made huge leaps and bounds. But for them to be able to go, okay, no worries, we'll do the team orders thing, is a strong place for Ferrari to be for next year.
Yeah, I think they're in a good place in team-wise. I'm still not sold on Binotto, but hey, it seemed he's going to be round, so I can't do anything about that. But look, I think for Ferrari, they're definitely in a they're in a rebuild era at the moment, and there seems to be the off-track stuff of their marketing. They're not doing the normal Ferrari flamboyancy. They're knuckling down. That stuff will come when Ferrari gets better. They're knuckling down, and they're doing everything right at the moment from an organisational perspective, from an outsider looking in. My issue is those 2 will explode at some stage, right? At the moment, there's enough food on the table for both of them to go around, if you want to put it like that. There's enough. They're both fighting for points. It's pretty even. They've secured 3rd. They're doing the team thing. It is easy to play the team game when they're in that position. But come to a world championship, and if it's those 2 fighting it out, or there's another, there's 3 or 4 cars in it, and they're all going for that one thing. It's like, right, we've done the hard work. We've come up as a team. We've done everything right. As I said, there's meat everywhere for people to get. Bang. Now you're in this fight for the one thing that everybody wants. And I think that relationship will blow up considerably if those 2 drivers are in the chance to win and fighting each other for a world championship.
Yeah, they haven't ordered any greens or salad. It's just meat on the table.
Oh, you know what I'm trying to say.
Lewis, make that a breakout. That's a good one.
Taking note of that time. But, they're still being outperformed, though, in Pierre Gasly in 6th. Of course, it's not enough when Tsunoda's not scoring points to help AlphaTauri jump along. But for this year, it has to be said that AlphaTauri, to me, seem to be the more successful Italian team than Ferrari. And I'm still very impressed that Pierre Gasly is managing to perform so well while still in your bin, Campy.
Well, interesting stat that I heard tonight on the commentary was 13 times he's qualified in the top 6 out of 22 races this year.
Huge.
That is a mind-boggling stat. I would say he's probably the best outside of the Mercedes and the Red Bulls for qualifying this year. So kudos to them. The Honda units obviously are pretty strong, but, you know, I've told you what I think of him. Is he in the bin? Yes, he's still in there for me, but along with Freya, she's in the bin. I put her in the bin, I think, for a comment she made on our Discord. So,
What? Seems to be unnecessary. Freya, sorry. I mean, look, you're in the bin. There's nothing I can do about it, unfortunately.
This is Campy's communist just put everyone in the bin party. Jeez.
Oh, this is a dictatorship, boys. You should know that.
Just channeling the state in which you live, my friend. But yeah, for AlphaTauri though, look, the pace, you said this yesterday, Campy, and I couldn't agree with you more. We have gone from junior team, the time of Brendan Hartley flailing around at the very back in what was Toro Rosso to well and truly sister team. I mean, they are, while they're not challenging for the very front, Pierre Gasly is so comfortable in this car. I know everyone's like, okay, he needs to go somewhere else to win a World Drivers' Championship. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. But for him staying in that seat for the next couple of years and just getting that pace and that experience, who knows what the driver market looks like in 2023, 24. You know, there could be an opportunity somewhere that could be very interesting for him. Alpine, it could be Ferrari, it could be anywhere. And, you know, he's the kind of driver like that Valtteri Bottas who, if something happens and someone leaves unexpectedly, that, you know, all right, well, we'll pull him up into this team. Probably it was too early the first time. Pull him up into this team and he can perform. So
if you were cynical, though, you would still look at the pace deficit over a race distance to Red Bull and AlphaTauri and you'd go, well, maybe it's not quite there because the difference between those top two teams and the rest of the field is massive.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems to me that AlphaTauri have got it right in comparison to the midfield, but the top teams is still like that jump to get that 1.2 seconds a lap over a race distance is massive and incredible. That ain't going to happen overnight. So if you're cynical, you could still say, well, maybe they're not a sister team, but they are in the right direction. They are trending upwards.
Yeah, and it's good. All I'm saying is it's great for them to be their own team in that respect. Let's talk about McLaren, Tommy T. As we mentioned, DR in fifth. He had a good little battle going on with Valtteri Bottas, which of course we didn't see. And Lando Norris finishing in the points in 10th, which he was unlucky when he came into that for that pit stop with the yellows the first time.
Oh no, that's been his position for the last 5 races, and we've been told that he's collecting points. So good on him for collecting 1 and 2 points for the last couple of weeks. Good on him. Good guy.
Just
and
Daniel
has
real
had no
consistent
points.
from Lando.
Shut up. All these UK commentators need to rack off. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And Danny Rick's now scored more points than Lando in the last, whatever races.
Exactly. So shut it. Just sick of it. No, I think Daniel was just probably unlucky with the timing of that first red flag, wasn't he? If he could have eked out a bit more of those hards and then could have had those mediums stay fresh for longer, I think that was just his one downfall, wasn't it? That at the end of that race, he just didn't have the legs on those tyres because he was right on Ocon for a good portion of that race, contending for that third position, and that would have been epic. And Campy would have just, probably danced, I reckon, on this podcast. He would have got up, probably done another shoey even. Cool. I reckon he probably would have, wouldn't you, Campy?
No, he wouldn't have done because he owns that microphone. He wasn't going to get beer on that one.
He's only doing it to your microphone.
Yeah, correct. All mine.
I would have done it to this microphone. Come on, I don't care. It's just stuff.
But what do you reckon, Campy? It was just tyres at the end, wasn't it, for him?
Oh, I mean, they both had 2 red flags and he got back on the hards, so it would have been tougher with the mediums, although I think he would have got the start. He probably wanted it if he was still on the mediums in the third. But, I mean, we shouldn't be surprised at Alpine's pace over race distance. We keep saying this over the last sort of 4 to 5 weeks that, hey, they will be good on some tracks. I don't think the McLaren was there. They've had the foot off the accelerator for the last, since Russia, really. I don't think they've been anywhere compared to what we've seen earlier in the season and some of their good performances, which is a shame. But Danny Rick's clearly, he was always going to have a good race tonight. I think 4th, he probably could have hoped for it, but probably wasn't on the cards as the race played out. So,
yeah, I mean, from McLaren's point of view, they've got to be happy enough with 4th. here is where I will mention V8 Supercars because at least Zach Brown can be happy enough with the Walkinshaw Andretti United entry with Chazzy and Chazzy taking it and whoever what's the other driver's name? I've just bloody forgotten. Well done me. Holsworth taking 15 years or 16 years to get a Bathurst win, and good for them. But at least Zach has got something to be happy about. I actually really enjoyed watching Bathurst yesterday. I don't watch V8 Supercars, but I watched the whole race, and the commentary was on point. I have to say,
they are so good. They were great,
incredibly good, and taking the piss out of each other. It's. I mean, maybe that's just an Australian way of doing things, but
more Australian commentators is what we're saying, basically.
But let me put it this way:
you've got to feel sorry for Van Gisbergen, don't you?
Oh. You would, because you're from NZ.
Yeah, I know. Sorry,
don't care for Gizzy.
Looking
sorry,
for the
mate.
feelings. No, don't have them.
Chaz is a star, though.
Yeah, and what a legend! And still,
how's his mo?
Yeah, you bloody love it. But they're still carrying that injury from a couple of years ago as well. The fact that he's winning races and then third in that championship. But what I just wanted to say about Mark Scaife, who is obviously a former driver and as a commentator, he's kind of the Brundle in that equivalent world. And there's a couple of them, Mark Larkham, a few others as well, who are very good in that space. Groundskeeper Direster, if you want to just maybe take some notes, and this is how you do it. In fact, it'd be good to get them on the SkyPad. Let's see. With Mark Larkham on the SkyPad. Yeah, boys, unbelievable. If you just have a look at this here, right, we'll just go real zoom it in. Oh, look at that. Oh, I can't believe it, boys. And I tell you what, it's going to be a bloody good finish to the race. Love it.
I love it.
That's what we want.
Can't help yourself.
Don't try and be self-important and be smart. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, anyway, it was good. It was good to watch. But anyway, let's talk about Alpine. Fernando Alonso almost lost it into a wall. He spun it around, managed to save it. Ended up in 13th. Not really the sort of follow-on race, I should say, from Qatar that he would have wanted. Third, they almost got third with Ocon. So from a team perspective, Alpine would have be pretty happy, I should say, with third and third. But they should be happy enough with fourth. Of course, Valtteri Bottas doing a Lance Stroll at Azerbaijan to him and pipping him at the last moment across the line. But it's good. It's a fairly good weekend for Ocon. I mean, he was never in that fight to get into first, even if he started and had a fairly good start. He would have been taken at some point. And considering where they qualified, which was not all that great, it was ninth. Pushing up to fourth is a good outing for them. But Fernando, I can only sort of dream, Tommy T, of what Fernando would have done, starting on pole for that restart.
Yeah.
That would have been epic, wouldn't it? I think he had a late tyre change as well. They just did a safe change. So he probably would have been closer to 10th or 11th. But yeah, it just wasn't his weekend, was it? He was just unlucky with positioning and traffic and red flags, just all at the worst time. Yeah. I think he was one of those ones that jumped in for a tyre change. And if you jumped in the tyre change, like Campy mentioned, for the safety car, and then you hit a red flag, you were stuffed because you'd shown all your cards and everyone else got a free stop when you'd already made your change. So there's no net win there.
It's disappointing for him, but look, we still love that he's there. Still looking forward to him being Oscar Piastri's teammate in 2023. Red Bull. Well, now we can probably talk about this. Let's say Red Bull Mercedes. Let's merge these two teams together and talk about it, because the first thing I want to talk about that we haven't really discussed yet is the letting Lewis buy incident and everything that sort of came with that. So, of course, Campy, talk us through the timeline of what happened here.
I think it was about lap 40. There was a virtual safety car. A bit earlier, actually. There's a virtual safety car which allowed Lewis to get right up close to Verstappen, and he ended up getting in par with him on the straight. Now, they had another little excursion at turn 1 and turn 2, and the stewards didn't deem it necessary for Max to give the position back. But because of what happened early in the race, Red Bull said to Max, hey, give it back and we'll try and pass him. As Red Bull tried to make that manoeuvre, they're telling Max to slow down, and Max was trying to slow down so that Lewis got in front just before the DRS thing. The track was quite a skinny part, and Lewis is coming up to him going, what's going on here? What's happening? I'm not sure whether I should overtake him now, wait till over the line. But was he slowed down? And right at the last minute, as the track opened up, Lewis went right, and they collected each other, went up the rear of him. So from that point, Max took off again, and Lewis took off again up the road after him, and the incident was then being investigated by the stewards about what's happening. So I'm still not sure whether in the end, Max got a 5-second time penalty, but I don't know for what incident it was at the moment. I'm not sure if it was for the turn 1 excursion and not giving the place back, or the unsportsmanlike driving. Not that it's unsportsmanlike, but the dangerous driving that occurred when you slow down on a track like that. Anyway, so after all of that, after the crash, Max let Lewis past, and by that stage, Max had nothing left in his tyres to try and fight him back and get the lead, and took that 5-second time penalty, and Lewis opened up a 7 or 8 second gap over the last 10 laps. So not sure that Max had to give the position back after the incident, but it's a tough one. It's just, this is where it got really confusing for me.
So it was the excursion that he didn't give the place back, 5-second penalty after the incident with the crash. And then he's got the 5-second penalty, and then he lets Lewis past anyway, which was the team radio that said, not sure you had to do that, Max, but no worries, whatever, like it's done now.
Yeah. He was probably thinking about the fastest lap at that stage.
The issue then that came out was Mercedes obviously jumping up and down to Michael Massey, and Michael Massey saying, guys, I told you that, I've told Red Bull that they need to give the position to you. And he said, yeah, well, you told me as that crash happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's tough.
Absolute chaos. I think, Tommy T, it plays into a little bit of our conversation yesterday about flags, and the communication and what happens. And, of course, brand new track. Look, I know we've put Michael Massey in the bin quite a lot, and for sometimes I absolutely think he's been in the bin, but for him, for this, or for that whole team, stewards, the whole race directing team, all of these safety crew, this is the first time they've had a race. It's an absolute shambles. Let's just bloody hope for next year they've got it sorted out. And the teams now, they've got some data to work through and have a good debrief, because there was a whole lot that could have been done better. Do I blame Michael Massey for a lot of it? Not really, though, because it's just so much jeopardy and so many interesting situations and storylines that happened.
For sure.
For me, that where Tommy T, Max sort of parked the car for that pass, obviously he was trying to slow down for that DRS line, which Campy pointed out, and that in the detection zone, I should say, and that's fair enough. But do you think he could have pulled over to one side of the track a little bit more and made it a little bit more obvious, or is this mind game central?
He probably could have more. He probably didn't want to go on the dirty side, though. He was probably like, I don't have to. Mm-hmm. And he probably felt like it was clear enough that he was letting the position past, that Lewis knew what to do there. Like, I mean, even if he wasn't, he was slowing down enough that that Lewis should have made a move regardless. I don't think you can put that on Max, because I don't think he changed direction enough to warrant the contact. I think that was still on Lewis. Like, yes, he was probably going slower than anticipated, but it's still on the driver behind. It's like anything. If you have full visual of what's ahead of you, you can't see clearly what's behind you. So I don't think you can really put much on Max, especially when he was under the orders to do that. He can choose which side. He did leave definitely enough space for Lewis to go past. But I think it is, like you said, I think it's down to the timing of this communication, and maybe the FIA in these situations just needs a direct line to the drivers. Max, Lewis, give the position back, or whatever it is, make it super clear so they're both getting the information at the same time from an independent body, rather than like relaying it in Chinese whispers and delays and all these kind of things happening, which causes this. Maybe that's the case. I don't know.
Yeah, I like it. And it's a one-way conversation. The drivers can't talk back. It's just, this is what's happening.
Yeah,
I think that's
interesting. Can I say too, I think that pass that Lewis tried to make on Max, I think that was more of a racing incident than anything we've seen in the last 3 or 4 incidents between these two drivers. I don't think Lewis was clearly in front. He may have had the line, but like Max is entitled to break late.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, if anything, Lewis missed the apex and pushed him a bit wider.
Yeah,
but Lewis then still made the corner and made that effort, whereas Max just continued on through the chicane and took the fastest line he could out of there. And I think that's probably why they
lasting
had to make
advantage.
the decision they did.
Yeah.
But I think that's a racing incident. I think in the end, with the result that we got, I think Lewis was probably entitled to the win more than Max was. Max got super lucky in the positions that he found himself in, but I think Lewis probably would have passed him on track with the degrading tyres that Max had.
Yep.
And I think the result was probably fair for the overall Grand Prix and how it played out. In saying that, I'd just rather Lewis get the job done on track, and there's just no officiating and crap that goes with it. And so, look, mate, cracking Grand Prix from things happening. It wasn't the greatest Grand Prix to watch. Well, that was very frustrating, but geez, hey, we need to enjoy it. Stop getting cynical.
It'd be a good
it.
Netflix episode, won't it?
This whole season in February is just going to be. Whilst I'm not sure I want to do an episode by episode review like we did this year, Tommy T, certainly will be good to
Let's just do a watch along, then we don't have to think.
Oh, that's a good idea. That is for sure. Well, look, that is Mercedes and Red Bull. Hamilton first, Max Verstappen second, Bottas third, and Perez DNF'd. Points standings are like this: 369.5 points for Max Verstappen, and also 369.5 points for Lewis Hamilton. In the constructors, well, it's Mercedes in the lead, 587.5 to Red Bull's 559.5. Well, geez, it's. These second drivers have a lot to do, don't they? And you can tell when something happens, like Sergio Perez just not even getting in the points at all, that constructors championship is almost tied up with Mercedes now.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't care about the constructors. I wholly care about the drivers.
Of course.
But we have set this up like to the point where are we going to see Schumacher v old mate? What's his name? Where he takes the commentator, Damon, or a Prost Senna where they take each other out. I mean, are we set for that next weekend? Because Max wins on countback 9v8. I mean, if you're looking at it from Max's perspective, Mercedes have won the last three and clearly the better car at the moment. Abu Dhabi is very much a Mercedes track, although Red Bull got the job done there last year. Mm-hmm. Do we see Max get cheeky?
Do we see Max get cheeky, or do we see Sergio Perez offered an additional year on his contract if there's a bit of a yeet? Or maybe
see that,
like, Sergio Perez is sick, unfortunately. Who's the reserve driver? Danny Kvyat. Ends up crashing into Max.
There's no way. There's no way he's on Max's side.
I was going to say.
Max is fathering his child.
No, that's why I was saying. I was like, hang on. Like, take this.
I hope we don't see it. I hope we get the craziest race we've ever seen next weekend.
As you say, Campy, it's so
Max
good.
passes Lewis passes Max. They both finished 1-2 for the 100th time this season. And
who's one and who's two?
Yeah, it's going to be
place your bets. Who do you think? Right? Let's do it now. Let's put our predictions in.
I'm the same. The heart says Max, but the head can't go past Lewis and on the charge he's at the moment.
I think Lewis.
I think next week we're going to look back and Lewis is going to be world champion and we're going to go back to the race before Brazil, whatever that was, and go, geez, Max has won. He's 20 points ahead. If Lewis wants to win this, he needs to win the last 4 Grand Prix and Max will finish second because that's how good they are. And he ended up doing it. Like, that to me is just going to be mind-boggling for Verstappen to overcome.
This would be his best championship, I think.
To
have it go down to the wire and to have this level of competitor.
Top two.
08 was good.
But 08 was, again, down to the wire, right?
Yeah.
It was,
he'd crossed the line and he wasn't world champion. When Massa crossed the line.
Yeah. So I think you're right.
Bloody Sato. Takuma Sato. Pitted on the last lap. What an idiot.
But I think then Lewis can drive off into the summer
I think you're
and
right,
then come back next year with a lot less pressure, and he's now the world's greatest ever. He's ticked all those boxes, and he can just enter into this new era of still being competitive, but do you know what I mean? He doesn't have to get that next title because he's already got it. He's already got the most ever.
And how's this for a comment from Bernie Eccleston? I thought Lewis would have retired at the beginning of this year in respect to Michael, so he wouldn't have won an 8th world championship.
Shut up, Bernie.
Shut the hell up, Bernie Eccleston.
Bernie.
Talk about relevance deprivation, mate. No one gives a shit. Go away and go back to owning your terrible track. I know you don't own it anymore because one of your ex-wives does. Anyway, that's...
she owns Magello, don't you, or Turkey?
I don't know. So I thought it was... Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's talk about fantasy very quickly. Some great names in here. Ted the New Shakespeare, Alex B. Construction zone, use caution, reduce speed. Well, that's just an absolute... that's the summary. Steen N for this. Ted Kravitz's shorts, Byron H. Ambition over adhesion. That's... Geez, that was said a lot in Brundle Bingo this weekend, David L. Tommy T borrows the tinfoil beanie, Nicholas H. Yum Yum oil money seasoning, Lauren R. Arabian Nights, a tale of one night and two drivers. Yeah, well, that continues, doesn't it, as we go. As we've mentioned, Abu Dhabi, Yas Queen Marina is the last race of the year, and there's been a turn 9 change. So the complex that was at the end of the back straight, a left into a right, into a left, into a left again, has just been replaced with one big corner. So that's potentially going to be interesting. Another passing opportunity is the thought process for that spot. Really, though, as we've said, who do we think is going to take it? Well, look, I think Lewis is on the charge, but we even heard over the radio he was getting super flustered. So is Max. This is really down to the wire now. Anything could happen. There's plenty more to come. Well, a massive thank you to you for listening, of course, to this podcast episode. Don't forget that we are over on the Discord server, so you can jump across and watch a race with us. I'm going to do myself a self-plug here, lads. I hope you don't mind. Good news.
Go for
Good
it.
news. I'm actually traveling to the United Kingdom for Extreme E's final race, the Jurassic X Prix, and you'll get to see my ugly mug on the live stream for YouTube, doing a pre and post-race show, as well as some podcast interviews. One of which hopefully will be with Zach Brown. I'm keeping everything crossed, but I may or may not be around for the. Well, I definitely will be now. I'm just going to find a way to make it happen for the race review from next week. I just might be watching it in the desired time zone, so I might go get myself a Sunday lunch so that everything that Crofty talks about I can associate with for once. Well, that's it for this week.
You going with Lamo as well?
Yeah, Michael Laminato is joining me from doing all of the. I mean, he's the professional. I'm just tagging along to be honest. We're talking about what possibly would happen if we're both over there for that Monday. Is like, I've got 4 podcasts to record and all this writing for Racer Magazine. I was like, yep, okay, cool.
Well, Jim, I can assure you I hate electric racing, but I will watch you, mate, just to see you doing what you do.
And the good news is you don't need to be subscribed to anything except for, you don't even need to be subscribed. You just watch it on YouTube. There's no paid TV wall barrier for the stuff that I will be doing, which will be exciting. Anyway, that's all to come. In next weekend, the championship will be decided one way or another. Will we see a big Max Verkrashen and victory? I wouldn't be totally upset by it, but it will be a hell of a story, wouldn't it, lads? Well, looking forward to it. We will chat in a week's time ahead of the Yas Queen Marina Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
It's my favourite thing we've done, I think. Yas Queen Marina.
Campy still has no idea.
He doesn't get it, but it's so good. It's the best. Like, full spec. Give me all of it.
Well, I want full spec, but not 16-inch. Only
same.
14
I'm
inch
with
travel.
you. Yeah. Yep. Little boy.
Context is important. Like one little boy. I went up too early. That was very funny.
That laugh? That was good.
I genuinely enjoyed that. That just shows how tired I am.
Wow.